Hey guys, tonight we're easing into the ordinary, messy, sometimes hilarious life of a Roman apartment dweller. Forget palaces and togas tonight. You're squeezing into a creaky, overcrowded insula, one of those Roman apartment buildings, stacked like ambitious bread loaves. The air smells faintly of old olive oil, damp stone, and bread that's somehow always slightly burned on the bottom. The walls are thin, the floor's grown under your neighbor's sandals, and somewhere downstairs, a donkey's probably chewing on someone's laundry again. You probably wouldn't survive this, not the stairs, not the lack of plumbing, and definitely not the fire hazards that pop up like overly enthusiastic street magicians. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your local time and where you're listening from down in the comments. Always love seeing where the sleepy postal crew is tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake before dawn, cold awkwardly on a lumpy straw mattress, the sounds of Rome already worming their way into your ears. Vendors shuffle into the streets, their wooden carts creaking as they unload baskets of bread and fish that were probably fresher yesterday. Someone's rooster crows aggressively 3 times too early, and you hear the rhythmic thunk of your upstairs neighbor's sandals pacing directly over your face. The light creeps in thin and dusty through your tiny window, just wide enough to let in the morning breeze and the occasional pigeon who apparently has no concept of personal space. Your apartment, if you can call it that, is perched precariously on one of the upper floors of an insula, a Roman apartment block where space is more dream than reality. Your walls are made of plaster and wood, quick to crack and quicker to spread the sounds of your neighbor's arguments, or worse, their attempts at singing. You drag yourself up, bones creaking a little like the floorboards beneath you, and step carefully around your most valuable possession, a cracked clay jug that you'll need to fill with water soon. But first, you stretch, poking your head out the window to get a feel for the morning mood. Below you, the streets are already buzzing. A baker shouts out his prices in a sing-song rhythm while stray dogs circle his cart, clearly unimpressed with the security measures. 2 women balance baskets of laundry on their heads, trading gossip about a local merchant's scandalously undercooked fish. The smell of yesterday's cooking still lingers in the air. Garlic, lentils, and whatever spices the neighbor's cousin's brother managed to sneak in from the market. There's also the unmistakable scent of, well, the streets themselves. Rome, as glamorous as it pretends to be, doesn't believe in waste removal that's particularly timely. Chamber pots are emptied with the sort of hopeful aim that makes walking beneath windows a high-risk activity. As you stretch your arms, you hear the familiar sound of the town crier's bell clanging faintly from the forum. He's probably announcing something important, like a new tax on fish sauce, or which roads are mysteriously closed today due to scheduled repairs that everyone knows will take until the next emperor's reign. Your neighbor clatters down the stairs in his rush to reach his bakery shift, mumbling curses as his sandal strap betrays him halfway down. You hear him pause, probably to repair it with the universal Roman solution, tightly wrapping it with whatever scrap cloth is in reach. Historians still argue whether insulae were truly the fire traps ancient writers made them out to be, or if that was just upper-class propaganda to make apartment living sound like sleeping in a tinderbox. Some suggest that while fires did occur frequently, they might have been less apocalyptic than the dramatic scrolls imply. Others insist that if you lived above the 2nd floor, you basically rolled the dice every night. As you move toward your Front door a slab of wood that's warped just enough to never quite close properly. You catch the distant laughter of children chasing each other through the early morning market lanes. Someone is already setting up a puppet show on the corner, the marionettes swaying eerily in the soft breeze, waiting for their first sleepy audience. You step out carefully, navigating the staircase that sighs under your weight. The wooden beams feel like they've been one bad rainstorm away from collapse for the past 5 years. You step over a loose tile and continue your descent, offering a quick nod to your neighbor's cat, who stares at you with the quiet judgment of someone who knows your rent is overdue. Once you're on the street, the city wraps around you like a slightly too warm cloak. Vendors bark prices, donkeys shuffle by with baskets strapped to their sides, and the uneven cobblestones beneath your feet remind you that tripping is always just one lazy step away. You pass the local corner shopper thermopolium where early risers sip watered-down wine and tear off pieces of crusty bread. The shopkeeper raises an eyebrow, offering you a chunk of yesterday's loaf at a discount that sounds generous, but probably is and single quotes deduct your belly grumbles. But water comes first. The Roman morning moves quickly. Blacksmiths clang away in their workshops. Perfumers open their shutters to release sharp, sweet scents, and housewives barter over the freshest vegetables, their voices rising in a familiar melody of half-friendly, half-combative negotiation. You overhear two men arguing about last night's chariot race. One swears his team was cheated by a false start, while the other laughs, claiming it's just because their driver couldn't steer a shopping basket straight, let alone a team of horses. The city feels alive, pulsing with a rhythm that you've long since matched, even if your sandals are wearing thin and your morning hunger is knocking louder than usual today. As you make your way toward the nearest fountain, clay jug tucked under your arm, you know that today will be like most others, dusty, loud, slightly precarious, and stitched together by the thin but sturdy threads of routine. And as you turn the corner, the sky just beginning to soften into a proper Roman blue, you find yourself easing into the day's rhythm, step by careful step. The fountain you're heading to isn't grand. It's no marble masterpiece with lion-headed spouts or glittering mosaics. It's a small, cracked stone basin fed by an aqueduct that probably isn't the most reliable branch in the system. But it flows most days, and that's good enough. You fall into line behind a small cluster of neighbors who've all brought their own chipped jugs and battered buckets. The man in front of you, Marinus, yawns so hard he nearly drops his jug. He offers you a sleepy nod, and you both exchange the kind of neighborly grunt that says, "Yep, we're still alive." Just barely. The woman behind you complains softly to her friend about the rising price of garum, the fermented fish sauce that Romans seem to pour on everything with reckless abandon. You don't dare say it out loud, but you're starting to suspect that the secret ingredient in garum is probably questionable hygiene. As you wait your turn, the water splashes steadily, its rhythm a quiet heartbeat against the city's louder hum. A boy darts past, nearly knocking over Marinus's jug. The older man scolds him with the kind of half-hearted irritation that signals he's already lost that particular battle 100 times. You finally reach the spout and fill your jug carefully. Water isn't exactly scarce in Rome, thanks to the aqueducts, but hauling it up 3 flights of stairs in a sloshing clay container is its own kind of morning workout. Historians still argue whether all Roman apartments had guaranteed access to clean water. Some suggest that upper floors were often dry, relying entirely on tenants' daily treks to the nearest fountain, while others propose that enterprising landlords rigged crude pipe systems often illegal to siphon water from nearby sources. Whether those pipes actually worked, though, is still a subject of debate. With your jug balanced precariously against your hip, you weave through the growing crowd, careful to avoid the puddles that gather in the cracks between stones. Slipping here would mean not just losing your precious water, but earning the kind of theatrical scolding from the old fishmonger that echoes down the street for hours. You pass a small street shrine, a humble offering spot, cluttered with wilting flowers, burned out oil lamps, and a few coins that haven't been stolen yet. A young woman carefully pours a little wine onto the ground as a morning offering to the Lares, the household gods who supposedly keep watch over homes like yours. You leave a small crumb of bread, just in case they're feeling generous today. The climb back up to your apartment is as brutal as ever. Each step creaks and shifts, the wood worn slick by countless feet. You lean your shoulder against the wall for balance, knowing exactly where the worst squeaky plank is. You've tripped over it enough times to develop a personal vendetta. When you reach your door, your arms trembling slightly from the climb, you place the jug down carefully and pause to catch your breath. Your neighbor's child peeks out from their doorway, offering you a gap-toothed grin before disappearing back inside, probably to tell her mother that the water fetcher survived. Again, inside, your room feels smaller in the morning light. The cracked walls catch the sun in odd angles, and the single wooden table stands as your proudest piece of furniture, mostly because it hasn't collapsed yet. You break off a small chunk of stale bread and dunk it into yesterday's leftover lentil mash, softening it just enough to chew without cracking a tooth. It's not glamorous, but it's enough to keep you upright. You gather your things for the day, your worn leather pouch, a thin wool tunic draped over your shoulder, and the coins carefully tied into a scrap of cloth. You're due at the dock soon, helping unload shipments of grain and maybe, if the overseer's in a good mood, securing a bit of extra pay by hauling amphory. You can already feel the sweat waiting for you. On your way out, you cross paths with a woman balancing an impossibly large basket on her head, moving with the effortless grace of someone who's probably been dodging street obstacles since she could walk. She offers a brief warning about a backed-up drain to streets over. You make a mental note to avoid that particular river of misfortune. The streets are fully awake now, a tangle of traders, house servants, schoolboys with wax tablets, and stray dogs that always seem to know which butcher drops the best scraps. The rhythmic calls of sellers float through the air, fresh olives, salted fish, sweet honey cakes that you can only dream of affording. Your route takes you past a bathhouse just starting to open for the morning. A young man sweeps the entryway, his movements slow, the day's heat already teasing the back of his neck. The bathhouse won't be crowded yet. Most workers will wait until later in the day, after their labors have properly worn them down. You wonder briefly if you'll have enough coin to visit this evening. A cold plunge might help ease the strain in your shoulders. Historians still debate whether common apartment dwellers could afford regular trips to the baths, or whether such luxuries were reserved for wealthier citizens and occasional indulgences. Some argue that the baths were accessible social hubs for all classes, while others suggest that entrance fees, even modest ones, kept the poorest Romans outside. Peering in, you navigate a tight alley where laundry lines crisscross overhead, the wet cloth occasionally dripping onto the unsuspecting heads below. You sidestep a donkey that seems completely unfazed by its parking violation and dodge two enthusiastic boys swinging sticks as imaginary swords. There's a rhythm to these streets, a daily shuffle, a song with 100 verses that all hum along whether you're listening closely or not. Your steps carry you toward the grain docks, where the smell of river water, wet rope, and baked bread mingles into a scent that's not entirely unpleasant once you get used to it. You take your place among the dock workers, your hands already feeling the ghost of the baskets and sacks. You'll be lifting all morning. As you start your shift, the sounds of the city swirl around you, calls, laughter, arguments, footsteps, and you find yourself easing into the quiet comfort of repetition. The city may be loud, the streets may be crowded, but there's a strange peace in knowing exactly how the morning unfolds, in stepping into the familiar dance of daily life in a Roman insula, where each creak, shout, and splash is just another note in the sleepy song of your world. The grain sacks you heft are heavier than they look, their rough fibers biting into your palms as you brace your knees and swing one over your shoulder. You fall into the rhythm quickly, lift, carry, stack, lift again. The dock creaks beneath you. A quiet chorus of strained planks and slushing water. The overseer shouts, though not at you this time. His voice cuts through the morning haze, barking at a young man who's dropped a crate of amphorae, the pottery, now leaking cheap olive oil into the cracks between the boards. You wince on his behalf, knowing full well the man's wages will be docked for the spill. Sweat beads along your brow, slipping past your temples and leaving pale streaks in the dust clinging to your skin. The Tiber's sluggish current glints nearby, its surface dotted with floating leaves and the occasional brave duck. You shift your grip, the grain sack's coarse edges scraping your shoulder, and keep moving. Dockwork isn't glamorous, but it's steady, and you've learned the small tricks: how to brace your hip to offset the weight, how to pivot just so to avoid tweaking your back, and perhaps most importantly, how to position yourself near the crates that occasionally lose a piece of fruit to gravity. Today, single quotes, a small victory is a half-bruised fig that you catch just before it rolls into the river. You wipe it against your sleeve and pop it into your mouth. Sweet, a little sandy. Still better than the questionable garum-drenched stew you've got waiting at home. Historians still argue whether Rome's dockworkers were considered essential civic gears or disposable laborers in the grand scheme of the empire. Some believe their contributions to the grain supply chain were quietly respected. Others suggest they were seen as little more than movable muscles necessary, but entirely replaceable. You pause briefly to catch your breath, watching a barge glide by, its deck stacked with barrels, its crew moving lazily, their gesture slow. Under the rising heat, one man calls out to the dock, joking about the city's pigeons growing fat on the spilled grain. Another quips that the pigeons are better fed than the workers. You can't argue. After hours of lifting, the overseer waves you off with a gruff nod, indicating that your part is done for the day. You rub your aching shoulders and slip your meager pay into your pouch, the coins clinking softly, a sound that feels heavier than the sacks you've been hauling. On the way home, you wander through the narrow side streets, the kind where laundry drips from overhead lines and the scent of stew wafts from open windows. You pass a small tavern already drawing in the early drinkers, their conversations peppered with slurred Latin and hearty, exaggerated laughter. The barkeeper gives you a familiar nod, one that says, "Come back later, if you can spare a coin." Your route takes you past a public latrine, its stone benches lined up over a running water channel. You know you should stop, but the line is long, and the smell is persuasive. You'll wait until the bathhouse later, you decide. Historians still debate whether public latrines were genuinely social spaces where Romans chatted freely while attending to their needs, or whether that idea has been over-romanticized by modern interpretations. Some evidence suggests they were casual gathering spots. Others hint that people may have preferred to finish their business quickly and without conversation, an ancient version of awkward elevator silence. You cut through a market square where vendors call out half-heartedly, their wares spread on warm cloth figs, olives, bread loaves that look suspiciously yesterdayish. You linger near a stall selling cheap, misshapen pottery, admiring a small cup with a cracked handle. You could use another cup. You also could use dinner, your stomach. Votes for dinner. You spot your neighbor Marinus a few stalls down, haggling loudly over a bunch of wilting greens. You wander over, and he greets you with a tired grin. He waves the greens like a victory banner, declaring them half price and almost edible. Together, you walk towards your insulae, your steps falling into that easy end-of-day shuffle. The streets buzz around you, but there's something comforting about knowing these sounds by heart: the creak of carts, the snap of linen, the distant clatter of the forum. As you near home, a group of children dash past, sticks in hand, pretending to be gladiators. One of them trips, but bounces up quickly, declaring that his opponent's spear was cursed. You can't help but chuckle. Childhood logic is undefeated. You pass a tiny bakery where the day's last loaf sit cooling. You buy a small roll with a precious coin, the crust rough, the inside soft enough to convince you it's fresh. You tear into it as you walk, savoring the simple pleasure of warm bread. Your apartment stairs creak familiarly as you ascend. The third step always groans extra loudly. You've long since accepted it as part of the ritual. Inside, you set your things down and pour yourself a small cup of water. The room smells faintly of wood smoke and something herbal drifting from your neighbor's window. You sit on the low stool by your cracked table, letting your shoulders settle into their familiar ache. Your neighbor calls through the thin wall, asking if you'll join for a quick meal later. You agree. It's easier to stretch a thin stew when everyone contributes something. Even if your offering is just a single bruised fig, you realize, with a kind of quiet amusement, that your day has already folded into the rhythm of the city: lift, walk, barter, climb, eat, rest. Tomorrow it will repeat, and somehow that feels more comforting than dull. You remember the pigeons at the docks, fat on spilled grain, living their best lives. Maybe they've figured it out. You let your gaze drift to the small crack in the ceiling where a stubborn vine has managed to poke through. You've meant to pull it down, but something about its quiet persistence feels right. It belongs here, just like you. Your body hums with the pleasant exhaustion of a day's honest work, and as the city outside softens into its evening tempo, you feel yourself easing into the rhythm, into the story that isn't grand, isn't heroic, but is entirely yours. The sun tips lazily toward the rooftops as you wander back down the creaking stairs of your insulae. The evening market waits. Its smell sharper now, its chatter brighter, its shadows longer. You head toward the small communal fountain at the crossroads, your empty amphora balanced against your hip, its cool clay pressing into your side. The streets are crowded, but not hurried. Children weave around your legs, their bare feet slapping against the packed dirt. The smell of roasted chickpeas wafts from a nearby stall, and you catch yourself veering toward it before remembering. Your purse holds precisely one coin too few. Water first. The fountain is crowded with your neighbors. Everyone arrives with a familiar rhythm, jostling politely, waiting their turn. One woman fills her jug while cradling a sleepy toddler on her hip. Two boys argue over whose turn it is to scrub amphorae for the baker. You nod to them all, a quiet acknowledgement that you share this little corner of Rome's heartbeat. The water trickles into your vessel, the sound soft and steady, and you let your gaze wander. Across the square, Marinus leans against a pillar, chewing on something that might once have been an apple. He catches your eye and waves you over. "You're coming tonight, right?" he asks, flicking his thumb toward the side street. You nod. Tonight is the dice game. You both return to your insulae, where the tiny, uneven courtyard becomes the unofficial gathering spot. Someone's brought a battered wooden board, and the dice clack satisfyingly against it, their tumble as familiar as the creak of the stairs. The evening's meal is simple, a bowl of lentil stew, mostly broth, with a few generous chunks of carrot, luxurious by recent standards. You trade stories and coins in the same breath, each roll of the dice punctuated by groans, cheers, and good-natured accusations of cheating. Historians still argue whether Roman apartment dwellers truly spent their leisure hours gambling regularly, or whether dice games were more often confined to taverns and the streets. Some suggest family-focused evenings were the norm. Others believe the game boards and worn dice found across the city hint at a widespread casual gambling culture woven into daily life. The dice clatter again, and this time you win. Marinus pretends to sulk, tossing a pebble in your direction. With the melodrama of a tragic actor, you all laugh, the kind of slow, genuine laughter that rolls from the belly, soft and unforced. Across the courtyard, someone starts humming a tune, low and steady, one of those songs that floats around the city, the words often swapped or half forgotten. You catch the rhythm easily, tapping your fingers against the rim of your bowl. Your neighbor Demetia appears from her doorway, clutching a small loaf. She breaks it in half and tosses you a piece without ceremony. It's dry, but you're grateful. You break off a chunk and pop it into your mouth, the rough crust giving way to a surprisingly soft center. You lean back against the warm stone wall, letting the last rays of sunlight stretch across your knees. The sounds of the city soften into a pleasant background hum, the clink of amphorae, the soft rush of sandals against the dirt, the murmur of distant conversations drifting through open windows. One of the boys in the courtyard challenges you to another round. You oblige, though the stakes tonight are laughably low. A peeled fig, a smooth pebble, a fragment of honey cake someone rescued from a market stall's end-of-day scraps. Still, you play. The dice tumble across the board again and again, their rhythm folding into the fading light, their clatter becoming just another part of the city's soft chorus. Historians still puzzle over whether these apartment blocks fostered genuine communal bonds or whether overcrowding bred frustration and isolation. Some argue that shared courtyards and tight quarters encouraged a neighborly rhythm. Others believe that conflicts, noise, and thin walls frayed patience more often than they nurtured it. But tonight, in your courtyard, there's no tension, just the easy shuffle of feet, the low murmur of stories traded over cracked bowls, and the occasional roar of mock protest when the dice land unfavorably. As darkness deepens, someone lights a small oil lamp, its flame flickering uncertainly in the breeze. Moths begin their slow orbit, their wings brushing softly against the lamp's glassy glow. You stretch your legs, feeling the quiet ache of a day well spent. Marinus groans as he leans back, his hand pressing against his lower back like an old man, though he's barely older than you. He grins when he catches your smirk, muttering something about grain sacks being heavier this year. The breeze carries the faint scent of baked fish from a tavern to streets over, and you wonder briefly if your neighbor's stew could be improved by borrowing a spoonful of garum. Then you remember the last time you tried that experiment. Your taste buds still haven't fully recovered. The dice game winds down naturally, the way candles sputter out when no one's watching. The group dissolves in slow pairs, in lazy, one more thing conversations. In the soft shuffle of sandals on stone, you climb the creaking stairs once more, this time with a loaf tucked under your arm, a gift from Marinus, who insisted it was payment for his losing streak. Your room is warm, the walls radiating the day's heat, the small window open, just wide enough to let the breeze stir the fabric draped over its sill. You sit, tear into the loaf, and watch the skies deepening blue, the stars just beginning to peek through the velvet dusk. You trace your finger along the table's edge, pausing at a familiar nick in the wood, a tiny reminder of the time you dropped a clay cup in a hurry. The city settles around you now, the hum softening, the conversations fading behind closed shutters, the occasional bark of a dog or distant clatter of a late-night cart, the only interruptions. You lean back, the weight of the day slipping from your shoulders like a well-worn tunic dot in this quiet pocket of Rome, where the grand triumphs and marble statues feel far away. Your story unfolds gently, woven from simple meals, worn dice, and the soft pulse of neighbors who know your name. And as the breeze stirs the vines still creeping through the crack in your ceiling, you smile, knowing that some rhythms, however small, are enough. The early morning creeps back in before you're quite ready. The sound of sandals shuffling on the stairs, of wooden shutters creaking open, of someone arguing softly, probably about water again, seeps into your room, the slow spread of sunlight across a worn table. You rouse yourself, stretching against the gentle stiffness in your shoulders. The room still smells faintly of last night's bread, and the distant tang of garum wafting in from someone else's breakfast. The vine in your ceiling crack trembles in the soft breeze, a tiny, leafy herald that the city is already moving. You splash a little water over your face, the clay cup cold against your palm. It's not enough to chase away the sleep entirely, but it will do. The mornings in an insula always begin with the quiet scramble for water and space. The staircase is a living artery at this hour, pulsing with the soft footfalls of neighbors, the clink of amphorae, the occasional bark laugh from someone carrying a basket that's just a little too full. Your own amphora is already half empty, but the thought of navigating the morning crush at the fountain makes you hesitate. You know the crowd will thin a little soon if you wait, if you time it just right. Instead, you step out into the street and let the morning wrap around you. The city feels lighter at this hour, like it hasn't quite put on all its weight yet. The scent of baking bread drifts lazily from the nearest thermopolium, a simple shop where warm food and gossip both travel quickly. You decide on a breakfast of flatbread with a smear of olive paste, just enough salt to tease your tongue awake. The shopkeeper, her hands already dusted with flour, nods at you and adds a few olives to your bundle without comment. Perhaps she remembers the time you helped her chase a wayward chicken through the market square. Historians still argue whether insula residents regularly relied on street vendors and thermopolia for their daily meals, or whether most prepared simple foods at home. Some suggest the lack of private cooking spaces on the upper floors drove people into the streets for sustenance. Others believe home-cooked meals remained common, especially among families with access to shared courtyard hearths. You lean against a cool stone wall, chewing slowly, watching the steady shuffle of Rome's morning rituals unfold. The fishmonger's cart rattles past, its load glistening and fresh, though you suspect the best catches have already been snapped up by the wealthier districts closer to the Tiber. Your neighbor Demetia calls out from across the street, waving a handful of laundry she's determined to wash at the public basin today. You wave back, your mouth full of flatbread, your other hand lifting your amphora in a lazy toast. The sky is still soft, the kind of pale blue that promises a warm day, but hasn't yet settled into its full heat. You make your way back to your insula, climbing the stairs with your usual rhythm, your body knowing the precise creaks and dips of each step. On your landing, Marinus is repairing a sandal, the leather stretched across his knee as he mutters about frayed laces and stubborn knots. Lost again last night, didn't you? You tease, dropping your bundle of olives next to him. He shrugs with exaggerated defeat. Perhaps I'll win today. I'd been practicing my glare. You both laugh, the sound light and familiar, the kind of joke that has no sharp edges. Inside your room, you notice the sunlight painting the wall in soft gold, illuminating the clay cup you left on the table, the fabric draped over the window stirring gently in the breeze. You settle into your morning tasks, starting with your tunic, a few loose stitches along the hem that have been threatening rebellion for days. Your fingers work the needle slowly, the rhythm of each pull, and not folding into the quiet hum of the insula around you. Historians still debate whether residents of these crowded apartment blocks had regular access to professional tailors, or whether most mended their own garments out of necessity. Some suggest tailors operated from small workshops near the insulae, providing affordable repairs. Others argue that simple sewing skills were a household staple, especially among those without the coin to spare. As you stitch, you hear Demisha's voice floating up from the courtyard, singing a laundry song half remember from your childhood. The melody wraps around you like soft linen, comforting in its simplicity. You pause, glancing at the small shelf where you keep your few treasures, a smooth river stone from a walk years ago, a chipped figurine that Marinus insists is lucky, and a carefully folded piece of cloth with a faint scent of lavender, a gift from someone whose name lingers at the edges of your memory. The morning drifts past you in slow, deliberate steps. You mend, you sort, you exchange lazy greetings with neighbors passing your doorway. Occasionally, a burst of laughter or a snatch of argument echoes up the stairwell, folding itself into the insula's familiar music. You step onto your small landing to shake out your tunic, the fabric snapping crisply in the breeze. Across the way, Marinus grins at you from his doorway, holding up his now-repaired sandal with a flourish. Victory, he declares, for now. You reply, the soft weight of the morning settling comfortably over your shoulders. The city hums around you, steady and unhurried, the day unfolding in its slow rhythm as the insula breathes with the quiet pulse of 100 small lives stacked gently atop one another. You watch the sun lift higher now, its light growing more certain, more direct, warming the clay walls and teasing lazy dust motes into soft spirals. The city around you begins to lean fully into its daytime rhythm, a little louder, a little faster. Though not by much, the insula settles into that familiar late morning shuffle, sandals against stone, the clatter of amphora lids, the soft scrape of wooden stalls being dragged into patches of sunlight. Neighbors pass by your open door with quiet nods, carrying baskets, cloth bundles, and sometimes a soft armful of grain. Everyone's busy in the way that apartment dwellers have always been, doing just enough to keep the day moving, but never fast enough to break the neighborhood's easy, layered hum. You decide to head to the fountain after all. The crowd has thinned now. Many have gone to the forums or their workshops, and the midday rush won't arrive for a little while yet. The public fountain is just a short walk from your insula, tucked along a street where the stone walls lean. In as if eavesdropping, the fountain's cool spray greets you with its usual soft splash. The marble is worn smooth from years of hands resting, leaning, waiting. You find your usual spot among the regulars, people whose names you know, Even if you've never formally met, you nod to an older woman who always seems to have the freshest gossip, and she gives you a sly smile, her hand resting lightly on the rim of her amphora. Historians still argue whether the urban fountains in ancient Rome served primarily as social hubs or simply as utilitarian necessities. Some scholars suggest the fountains were key gathering points, almost like local cafes, where daily news traveled faster than formal messengers. Others believe the sheer demand for water made these stops brief and practical, with most conversations happening elsewhere. You lean your amphora beneath the steady stream, feeling the cool splash against your knuckles. The stone is damp, slick in places, and the scent of the water is faintly mineral, clean but tinged with the city's ever-present dust dot as you wait. The woman beside you leans in, her voice low and conspiratorial. "Did you hear about Titus' donkey? Gone, vanished. Some say it wandered to the Subura. Others say he finally traded it for figs. Depends on who's telling it." You smile, the story itself more valuable than whether it's true. In the insula, in the fountain's orbit, these tales weave the neighborhood together, holding each splash, each waiting moment in a soft web of familiarity. You hoist your now heavy amphora carefully, adjusting the strap across your shoulder. The walk back is slow, steady, your steps careful over the uneven stones. You pass the baker's stall again. He's already sold most of his morning bread, and the remaining loaves lean against each other like sleepy sentinels inside your insula. The stairway greets you like an old friend, its familiar creaks, its soft trail of dusty footprints. You make your way up, pausing to let a neighbor's goat shuffle past. The goat's mild expression seems to ask you whether it was the one who ate Titus' donkey's figs. By the time you settle your amphora back in its corner, the midday lull's beginning to drape itself over the building. The air thickens slightly, the sunlight now heavy and golden, urging people toward shade, toward slow movements, toward quiet. You grab a small bundle of cloth and join Demetia in the courtyard, where the women are preparing to wash clothes. The stone basin is worn, its rim smooth from years of scrubbing, its surface splashed with soapy water. You kneel beside Demetia, working the cloth in the water's cool embrace, your fingers tracing the familiar rhythm of scrub, rinse, wring. She hums as she works, a lazy tune that's half song, half memory, pausing only to toss you a raised eyebrow when a neighbor's child sprints past, narrowly missing the edge of the basin. Historians still debate whether communal laundry was seen as a chore of pure necessity or a cherished social ritual among apartment dwellers. Some believe it was one of the few times women from different families and even social classes exchanged stories, jokes, and quiet advice. Others suggest it was simply work to be done quickly, with minimal chatter. Especially on hot days, you trade news, or at least your best version of it. Demetia tells you that Marinus has been seen practicing his dice rolls alone in the stairwell, a sure sign he's planning another attempt at a midday gambling session. You both agree, with the weighty certainty of apartment wisdom, that he will probably lose again. As the sun climbs higher, the courtyard slowly empties, its stones steaming faintly under the heat. The air thickens, heavy with the mingled scents of damp fabric, olive oil, and the faint tang of someone cooking lentils. Nearby, you return to your room, hanging your damp cloth near the window, where the breeze still teases the edges of the curtain. The vine in your ceiling crack trembles in the heat, its leaves curling just slightly. You rest on your low stool, savoring the slow quiet of the midday pause, that brief window when the city seems to hold its breath, when most people retreat. Indoors, when even the goats find a scrap of shade and refuse to move, your neighbors murmur softly through the thin walls, their voices slipping in like gentle ripples. Someone upstairs drops something with a dull thud, followed by a muttered curse. You feel the day's rhythm folding around you again, the steady pulse of apartment life, where the moments stack gently like amphorae, like folded tunics, like the quiet weight of stories passed over fountains and laundry basins. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the sounds drift around you, the faint splash of water, the soft hum of Demisha's song still echoing somewhere in the courtyard, the breeze brushing past the window, carrying with it the scent of sun-warmed dust and the quiet, steady life of your insula. The midday pause lingers, stretching itself lazily across the walls of your insula. The streets outside have quieted, save for the occasional clop of a sandal or the creak of a cart's wooden wheel slipping over uneven stones. Even the fountains seem to splash more softly, their streams dulled by the weight of the sun. Inside, you shuffle to a corner where a few dried figs rest in a shallow bowl. You pop one into your mouth, its soft sweetness clinging to your teeth, and you wash it down with a gulp of cool water from your newly filled amphora. The water carries a faint mineral taste, but in this heat, it's perfect. The air thickens just a little more. You adjust the curtain to let the breeze sneak in, though it's now more suggestion than actual relief. Somewhere above you, a neighbor shifts noisily on their wooden cot, probably dozing already, their breath slow and steady behind paper-thin walls. You grab a simple straw mat and stretch out for a brief rest yourself, the hard floor pressing against your shoulder blades in that familiar, oddly comforting way. You listen to the muffled layers of life in your insula, the scrape of a spoon against a clay bowl, the creak of a shutter being closed just a touch more to block out the stubborn sun. This is a quiet hour for everyone. The city leans into this softness. Bakers rest their sore feet. Traders count their morning coins with drowsy satisfaction. And the goats, those small, unbothered sentinels, lie sprawled in doorways like they've always owned the place. Historians still argue whether this midday lull was uniformly practiced across Rome, or if it varied wildly by district and social class. Some believe that even the busiest neighborhoods yielded to the heat in these hours, adopting a kind of informal siesta. Others suggest that the wealthier classes rested, while the working poor, especially apartment dwellers like you, simply used the time to complete quieter, shade-bound tasks. As you drift on your mat, you hear faint laughter from the courtyard, the kind that bubbles up despite the heat. You crack one eye open and smile, recognizing Marina's unmistakable voice as he attempts to convince someone, probably his usual gambling partners, that today is his lucky day. You rouse yourself slowly and decide to wander down the courtyards. Stones radiate the sun's memory, their warmth seeping into your sandals as you walk. Marina sits cross-legged on the ground, tossing dice with the theatrical flourish of a man who believes the gods are finally paying attention to him. His opponents, one of the baker's nephews, and a woman who repairs sandals, watch with amused skepticism. The coins between them are not many, but Marinus rolls with the same grandiosity he'd use if the stakes were gold. You squat nearby, letting your back rest against a cool patch of wall, and watch as the game unfolds. The rhythm is hypnotic: roll, groan, laugh, shuffle. Occasionally, Marinus tosses in a grand proclamation about the fairness of Fortuna, the goddess of luck, though Fortuna seems to find his losses particularly entertaining today. Historians still debate whether dice games among Roman apartment dwellers were primarily social rituals or if they often spiraled into serious gambling debts that could tip a household into financial ruin. Some scholars argue that these low-stakes games were simply a way to pass the heat-heavy hours, filled with playful bravado and neighborly banter. Others suggest that for the city's poorest, even small baits could carry uncomfortable weight. Marinus rolls snake eyes again and throws his arms up in mock betrayal. Ah, Fortuna, I see how it is. You prefer the sandal maker's hands today. The sandal maker smirks and scoops up the meager pile of coins. Perhaps she just likes people with useful traits. You chuckle quietly, savoring the easy rhythm of the exchange. The way it binds the courtyard together in this small, sun-drenched corner of the city. The air grows heavier as the afternoon leans on. You wander toward the shade of a neighbor's laundry line, where tunics sway lazily in the faint breeze. Domitia waves you over with a half-finished sandal in her lap. She's been patching the same frayed strap all week, more out of habit than urgency. You sit beside her, idly weaving stray bits of straw into loose knots as you trade the kind of news that never reaches the forums. Whose goat wandered where? Which amphora cracked during the morning water run? And the mysterious disappearance of a neighbor's cooking pot, lightly borrowed and promptly forgotten. The conversation drifts, soft and circular. You talk about small repairs that need doing around the building, the stairs that groan more loudly now, the latch on Marina's door that no longer catches properly. Did you know, Domitia muses, threading her needle carefully, that some people in the wealthier districts pay boys to stand by their doors and fan them all day? Can you imagine? Your whole job is just to wave a fan while someone eats grapes. You smirk. Maybe Marinus should try that. He's not much good at dice, but I bet he can wave a fan. Historians still puzzle over whether such dedicated fan-bearers were widespread luxuries in Rome, as this detail is the kind of playful exaggeration that crept into the writings of upper-class poets. Some believe these boys were a standard feature of wealthy households, part of the elaborate web of indoor comfort that separated the classes. Others suggest the image of constant fanning was more satirical, a humorous poke at the idle rich. You stretch your legs, leaning back on your elbows as Domitia's sandal takes shape beneath her practiced fingers. The shadows lengthen slowly across the courtyard, softening the stones, cooling the walls, folding the building back into its late afternoon hush. Somewhere, the scent of roasting chickpeas drifts through the air, blending with the faintly sour tang of spilled wine on warm stone. The goats, true to form, have claimed the shadiest corners, their lazy chewing a kind of background punctuation to the lull. You feel the insulae settle around you again, the walls breathing in sync, the courtyard's rhythm falling back into that familiar, quiet pulse. The soft hum of afternoon begins to stir as the sun edges toward its slow descent. The insula seems to stretch and flex after the midday lull, its narrow stairways filling again with footsteps, voices, and the shuffling of sandals brushing against worn stone. You rise from your spot near Domitia, brushing a few stray threads from your tunic. The courtyard now buzzes gently as people begin to prepare for the practical part of the day, errands that couldn't be rushed in the morning heat, conversations that need finishing, small repairs that can't wait for tomorrow. You make your way up the groaning staircase, the wooden slats creaking beneath your feet, their edges smoothed by the footsteps of 100 other apartment dwellers who've climbed these same stairs day after day. The wood leans slightly now, pulling away from the wall just enough to make you wonder quietly, always quietly, how long it will hold. Historians still debate whether insulae in Rome were carefully maintained structures or ramshackle piles that constantly flirted with collapse. Some scholars argue that the wealthier landlords ensured basic upkeep to avoid costly lawsuits or fires, while others believe the buildings were neglected, patched haphazardly, until disaster forced a full rebuild. Your own insula, you suspect, falls somewhere in the middle. The walls hold, mostly, the water flows, usually, and as long as you step carefully on the third stair, life continues. You reach your room and slide the wooden bolt across the door more for the comforting click than any real sense of security. The thin walls do little to keep out sound or determine neighbors, but it's part of the rhythm, part of the shared understanding. Everyone hears everything, and most pretend not to. The afternoon is toward the time for errands. You decide to head to the street-level taberna, where supplies oil, wine, olives can be traded, bought, or, in your case, bartered. You pass a young woman balancing a small amphora against her hip, her child trailing behind her with a toy made from a stick and a carved bit of bone. The child hums a tune you half recognize, one of those melodies that drifts easily from neighbor to neighbor, soft as the dust kicked up by sandals outside. The street presses in a narrow canyon of stone and timber. The scent of baking bread, curling through the air, mingling with the sharper edge of vinegar from a nearby fishmonger's stall. The taberna's open front yawns wide, its shelves stacked with modest goods, nothing fancy, nothing wasted. You nod to the shopkeeper, Licinnia, a woman with quick eyes and a faster tongue, who has long since memorized your usual trade habits. You place a small bundle of dried herbs on the counter, the result of a favor traded with a neighbor who cultivates a rooftop patch of greenery. In return, you receive a small clay jug of olive oil, its weight settling comfortably in your hands. Licinnia raises an eyebrow. These herbs are fresh. You've been sweet-talking the man with the garden, haven't you? You grin. It's more that his goat was about to eat the entire patch. I merely saved what I could. She laughs, a sound as sharp as the clink of amphorae being stacked. A hero, then, a hero for herbs. Historians still puzzle over how widespread rooftop gardening was in Roman apartment life. Some suggest it was a rare luxury reserved for the more stable buildings with flat, accessible roofs. Others believe it was a common, if precarious, part of daily life for those eager to grow a few fresh herbs or leafy greens without relying entirely on market stalls. You tuck the oil safely under your arm and wander slowly back toward your insula, the streets, energy flickering around you. Sellers call out half-heartedly, their goods thinning as the day wears on. Plump figs, bread still warm from the oven, clusters of grapes with the bloom of dust still clinging to their skins. You pause to admire a display of dyed fabrics, the colors vivid even in the fading light, deep ochres, dusty reds, and the occasional scrap of something approaching purple, though it's far too expensive to consider. A boy races past you, his tunic fluttering, his sandals slapping the stones, as he chases after a bouncing wooden ball. His laughter trails behind him, a soft echo that disappears around the corner. You glance toward the fountains, where the water glimmers in long, golden stretches, and you remember your need to fill your amphora again before evening. The fountain today is mercifully quiet, no long lines, no spilled arguments, just the steady splash of water and the soft scrape of clay vessels. You lower your amphora, letting it sink beneath the cool stream, the sound of the water rapping around you like a familiar lullaby. You watch as the vessel fills, the weight slowly returning to your hands. Historians still argue whether Rome's public fountains were always so freely accessible to the lower classes, or if their use fluctuated depending on season, wealth, and neighborhood status. Some believe the fountains were universally available, part of Rome's grand urban design. Others suggest that certain fountains were unofficially claimed by nearby elites, leaving the less desirable ones to apartment dwellers like you. As you heave the filled amphora back against your hip, you catch sight of a familiar figure, Marinus, again, gesturing wildly at a pair of men who appear deeply unimpressed by whatever story he's currently selling. You smile to yourself, comforted by the consistency of it all. Some people are simply born to argue loudly in public. You step around a lounging goat, who seems determined not to move for anyone, and make your way back to your insula. It's familiar. Wooden beams and dusty stairwell waiting for you. The sun now tilts low, the shadows stretching, folding themselves neatly into corners and doorways. The walls of your building glow faintly in the last of the daylight, their surface worn but sturdy, still holding the memory of countless footsteps, quiet conversations, and the slow, patient rhythm of apartment life. You climb the stairs once more, your steps matching the beat of a city that never truly stops, even in its softest hours. You reach your apartment just as the last of the sunlight begins to slide lazily off the rooftops, leaving the stairwell cool and quiet. The thin walls exhale the heat they've hardied all day, and the soft hum of the city settles around you like a familiar blanket. Inside, your small clay lamp flickers to life, its faint flame dancing as you carefully balance the fresh amphora of water and the jug of olive oil on your low table. The room feels softer now, wrapped in the muted colors of evening. This is the time when the insula truly comes alive, not in the clamor of the market or the bustle of morning, but in this in-between hour when neighbors linger at doorways, voices drift lazily through the walls, and the gentle rituals of dinner begin. You can hear the faint scrape of a neighbor's spoon against a clay bowl, the splash of water being poured into cooking pots, the low, rhythmic thump of a pestle grinding. Something fragrant. The evening meal in a Roman apartment is not the grand banquet of the elite, it's a humble, familiar thing, built from whatever could be gathered, traded, or stretched to last another day. Tonight, your dinner is simple flatbread torn into rough pieces, olives with their sharp, briny tang, and a soft cheese with just a hint of age. You drizzle a little oil across the bread, its smooth richness pooling in the uneven surface. As you eat, you lean against the cool plaster wall, listening to the ordinary symphony of your neighbors. Someone laughs, probably Marinus, still embroiled in his endless debates, while a woman calls softly to her child to come inside. Historians still debate the specifics of lower-class Roman diets, how much variety truly existed, whether apartment dwellers had reliable access to vegetables, or whether their meals leaned heavily on grain and preserved foods with only occasional fresh additions. Some scholars suggest that daily meals were surprisingly diverse, especially near the markets. Others argue that most apartment residents survived on repetitive, bland fare, unless they were particularly lucky or well-connected. You remember Domitia's offer of garum, the infamous fermented fish sauce that clings to Roman cooking like a stubborn shadow. You fetch a small dish of it now, dipping the corner of your bread into the pungent sauce. It's salty, sharp, a little too bold for some, but to you, it tastes like home. A small joke drifts to mind, an old market saying that garum is so powerful it could bring flavor to boiled sandals. You smile as you chew, half wondering the only one's ever actually tried. Across the narrow alley, you see a neighbor lighting her own lamp, the flicker of flame briefly illuminating the clay figures on her shelf, small household gods, known as lairies, their tiny faces smoothed by years of handling. You nod toward them out of habit, offering a soft, private greeting. It's not about belief so much as rhythm, a quiet acknowledgement that these little guardians are stitched into the fabric of daily life here. Historians still argue whether apartment dwellers maintained full household shrines like their wealthier counterparts, or whether their devotions were pared down to simple tokens: a single figurine, a scratched offering on a wall, a quiet nod to the communal lares at street corners. Some scholars insist the tradition was faithfully maintained in even the humblest rooms. Others suggest that for many, the practice was casual, folded loosely into the rhythms of the day without rigid structure. The sky deepens now, the stars beginning to scatter themselves lazily across the darkening canvas. The scent of burning oil drifts from nearby lamps, mingling with the faint traces of dinner lingering in the air. You wipe your hands on a worn cloth and rise to stretch your legs, stepping softly toward the shared balcony at the end of the hall. The wooden rail leans out over the narrow street below, where the last embers of daylight cling stubbornly to the rooftops. From here, you can see across to another insula, its windows glowing like scattered fireflies. A few figures linger in doorways, exchanging the slow, meandering conversations that belong only to this hour, when the heat has slipped away and the city exhales. You lean on the railing, feeling the smoothness worn into the wood by generations of resting elbows. Somewhere nearby, a musician plucks a stringed cithara, the soft, hesitant notes floating through the air like tiny steps on a quiet path. You let your gaze wander, tracing the rooftops where laundry lines stretch at low-hanging spider webs, where cracked tiles hint at stories of hurried repairs and quiet disasters averted just in time. You watch a woman toss a scrap of food toward the street, where a patient dog waits with the steady confidence of someone who knows he's part of the system. His tail thumps lazily as he devours the offering, his rhythm as slow and steady as the rest of the city's pulse. You wonder briefly what stories the dog would tell if given the chance. The insula creaks softly, the wooden beams shifting in their familiar size as the coolness of evening settles deeper. A neighbor steps onto the balcony beside you, nods a brief hello, then lights a small bundle of herbs, the fragrant smoke curling upward in lazy spirals. You both watch in silence, sharing the space without the need for conversation. It's a comfortable thing, this quiet, this shared pause at the edge of the day. Historians still discuss whether Roman apartments were seen as temporary stepping stones for the ambitious, or as permanent homes where families planted their roots, their lives unfolding in the same walls for generations. Some argue that insular life was inherently transient, a restless tide of tenants moving with the rhythms of rent and fortune. Others believe that many families carved out lasting, stable homes in these stacked, leaning buildings, their names etched into the soft grooves of the stairwells and walls. You trace a finger along the railing, feeling the faint notches someone carved long ago, names, perhaps, or a quiet rebellion against the passing of time. The street below hums more softly. Now, the voice is fading, the doors closing with gentle finality. The insula breathes, its bones settling for the night. You linger on the balcony a little longer, letting the slow rhythm of the evening carry you, the soft clink of amphorae, the low creak of shutters, the distant murmur of one last story being told before sleep. You step back into your room, the lamplight warm against the cool stone floor, the simple comfort of your space welcoming you back as the night deepens. You settle back inside your apartment, the small clay lamp still flickering, its light casting soft, lopsided shadows across the plaster walls. The night wraps itself around the insula like a worn woolen cloak, quiet, but never truly silent. Your bed, or what passes for one, is a modest wooden frame, with a rope lattice, topped by a thin, well-used mattress stuffed with straw. It creaks faintly as you lower yourself onto it, the rope sagging in that familiar way that suggests they've survived more than a few repairs. You shift, adjusting the lumpy corners of the straw stuffing, realizing as always that comfort is a loose concept here. The noises of the insulae never fully disappear. You hear a muffled argument 3 floors down, punctuated by the scrape of a clay pot being set a little too firmly on a table. A dog barks somewhere, its voice quickly absorbed by the soft thud of footsteps in the stairwell. You rest your head against a folded cloth that serves as your pillow, letting your gaze wander lazily across the cracked ceiling. Historians still debate whether Roman apartment dwellers prioritized sleeping arrangements in their cramped quarters. Some suggest that makeshift beds and mats were simply rolled aside each morning to free up space, while others argue that many residents carved out permanent sleeping areas, small sanctuaries in their modest rooms. The archaeological record is patchy layers of ash, lost timbers, and scattered pottery shards, but the rhythm of sleep was always present, carefully folded into daily life. You chuckle softly to yourself, remembering that old joke, a Roman bed is sturdy enough for 2, but loud enough for the whole insula. It seems like the walls here designed to share stories you didn't intend to tell. Sleep here comes wrapped in layers, familiar creaks, drifting scents of oil and ash, and the occasional distant clatter from the taverns that refuse to surrender to the night dot as you lie there. The gentle sound of water dripping from an unseen leak somewhere above taps out a lazy rhythm, a slow, steady beat like a pulse in the bones of the building. Historians still argue whether insulae were carefully maintained or mostly left to their slow decay, especially in the upper levels where the poorest tenants often lived. Some scholars suggest that landlords, often remote and unconcerned, repaired little beyond the most pressing structural needs. Others believe that some insulae developed their own informal repair networks among tenants, where skilled laborers patched walls and propped up sagging beams as a quiet investment in their own survival. You shift again, the straw rustling beneath you, the cool edge of the night air creeping in through the wooden shutters. Some say the upper floors of an insula were the most dangerous, the walls thinner, the ceilings lower, the stairways more precarious. Rent was cheaper the higher you climbed, but so was your chance of waking to a sudden collapse or a fire that sprinted to quickly up dry splintered beams. You've heard stories of people sleeping with a rope tied to their ankles, trailing down to a friend or family member on a lower floor, an emergency alarm system, just in case. You trace lazy circles along the edge of your worn blanket, thinking about the precarious balance of life here. There's comfort in the routine, but the knowledge of risk is never fully out of reach. The faint rhythm of distant footsteps on the stairs makes you wonder who's still awake. Perhaps a baker heading out early to prepare the next day's bread, or a servant sent on a late errand. Perhaps someone simply restless, drawn to the quiet pulse of the streets at night. You remember that some insulae were built tall 4, 5, even 6 stories, leaning precariously over the streets, their wooden balconies bowing slightly under the weight of laundry, baskets, and the quiet press of daily life. Historians still debate whether Roman regulations effectively capped the height of insulae. Augustus famously limited buildings to 70 Roman feet, but enforcement seems to have been uneven at best. Some scholars argue that landlords regularly flouted these restrictions, pushing their structures higher to squeeze in more tenants. Others suggest that most builders quietly respected the limits, knowing too well the risks of collapse. You wonder whether the builders of your own insula counted carefully or simply shrug and added another floor, trusting to luck, prayer, or the dubious strength of aging beams. The night breathes steadily around you, the sounds of the city softening like the hush of an exhaled breath. You hear the faint rattle of someone latching their door, the soft metallic scrape drifting lazily down the stairwell. The flicker of torchlight dances briefly through the narrow window before disappearing, swallowed by the hush of the street. You roll onto your side, pressing your hand to the cool wall, feeling the slight vibration of voices in the next room. They speak too quietly to follow, but the rhythm is familiar, a soft lullaby of life unfolding just on the other side. Your lamp burns low now, the oil thinning, the flame shrinking until it's little more than a stubborn glow clinging to the wick. You wonder, briefly, whether your building will outlast you, whether your name will linger in the notches carved into the railing or the faint scratches pressed into the wall near your door. There's a quiet comfort in knowing that you are one voice among anyone sleeper among dozens stacked above and below, each wrapped in their own straw-stuffed mattress, each listening to the same creaks, the same drips, the same soft lullabies of the insula at rest. The city outside slows, its heartbeat easing into the soft rhythm of sleep. You let your breath fall into step with it, your body settling, the worn mattress gently cupping your weight. The drip of water above continues, steady, patient, a soft metronome guiding you toward rest. You close your eyes, the gourd of garum tucked safely away. The day's small victories folded neatly into the slow hum of the night. The insula holds you gently, its walls still warm from the sun, its stories wrapped around you like a familiar song. You stir a little as the first soft sounds of morning begin to creep in, but the city doesn't wake all at once. No, Rome stretches into the day slowly, like someone reluctantly peeling back a blanket. The earliest risers are always the bakers. Their footsteps echo faintly through the stairwell as they hurry past your door, their arms probably laden with baskets or fresh loaves bound for the market stalls. You can almost smell it, the yeasty warmth, the crisp crackle of crust splitting in the oven. You linger on your mattress for a while longer, knowing that mornings in a Roman insula unfold in their own patient rhythm. There's no alarm clock snapping you out of sleep, only the soft shuffle of neighbors rising, the muted clink of cooking pots being unstacked, and the occasional splash of water as someone carefully pours from their precious amphora. Historians still argue whether residents of Rome's apartment blocks rose early out of necessity or their schedules varied widely depending on class and occupation. Some suggest that manual laborers and market sellers started well before sunrise, while others believe that the majority of Rome's apartment dwellers, especially those working in shops or workshops, maintained more leisurely morning routines. You eventually rise, stretching your arms overhead, your shoulders stiff from the straw-stuffed mattress. The wooden floorboards creak under your feet, their surface worn smooth by years of shuffling sandals. You reach for your small wash basin, a simple clay bowl resting on a low shelf. There's no indoor plumbing here, of course. You've filled it the night before with water hauled up from the street fountain. It's cool against your fingers as you splash your face, the droplets clinging briefly before sliding down your neck. You pat yourself dry with a scrap of cloth that's been mended too many times to count. It's the sort of humble luxury that Roman apartment dwellers know well. Clean, well used, good enough. Across the courtyard, you hear the familiar clatter of a neighbor carefully arranging his wares for the day. He's probably setting out bundles of cloth or perhaps jars of olives, their lids secured with tight seals of wax and twine. Breakfast, if you can call it that, is simple. You nibble on a piece of coarse bread left over from yesterday. Its edges a little tough, but still filling. If you're lucky, you might have a smear of cheese or a few olives tucked away, but more often than not, it's just the bread. Historians still debate whether Roman apartment dwellers ate most of their meals at home, purchased the majority of their food from street vendors and nearby Thermopylae small shops selling hot, ready-to-eat meals. Some argue that limited space and a lack of proper kitchens made eating out almost inevitable. Others suggest that many insular residents still prepared simple breakfasts and occasional stews in their small, smoky hearths. You step over to the window, easing open the wooden shutter to let the morning light spill in. The street below is already beginning to fill with soft noise, the low rumble of carts, the clipped commands of merchants, the lazy bark of a dog trailing after a butcher. The air carries the mingling scents of fresh bread, damp stone, and something slightly less pleasant drifting from the public latrine down the street. You tie your simple tunic at the waist, the fabric brushing softly against your skin. Its edges a little frayed, but still serviceable. You lace your sandals, worn but familiar, their leather stretched to the shape of your feet. You gather your things, a small pouch, 4 coins, a folded cloth, and, of course, your personal key. It's a bronze skeleton key, small enough to hang from a cord around your neck, used to lock the simple wooden chest that holds your most precious possessions. Probably not much by modern standards, but here a spare tunic, a wooden comb, a carefully wrapped oil lamp. Each item feels weighted with its own quiet importance. Historians still argue whether Roman apartment dwellers typically locked their rooms or relied more on community vigilance and social ties to keep their modest homes secure. Some scholars suggest keys and simple locks were common among urban residents, while others believe many people simply trusted their neighbors or left their doors ajar during the day. Especially in tightly knit insular communities, you shoulder your way into the stairwell, carefully descending the worn stone steps, your hand trailing lightly along the railing's edge. The stairway is narrow, steep, and slightly uneven, its stones rounded by generations of feet. The stairwell is its own small world, layers of graffiti scratched into the plaster, faint traces of messages and doodles left by earlier residents. Some are declarations of love, some are prayers. Others are just names, stubbornly clinging to the walls, like soft echoes of lives folded into the insula. You step outside into the soft glow of morning, the city warming gently around you. The sun spills lazily across the rooftops, catching on the fluttering laundry lines strung between buildings, their fabrics dancing in the breeze like flags of quiet resilience. You pass the bakery, where a queue is already forming, the smell of fresh loaves drifting sweet and heavy through the air. A boy darts past you, clutching a bundle of bread under one arm, his sandals slapping the stone rhythmically as he disappears into the next alley. You make your way toward the nearest fountain, the simple stone basin already surrounded by a cluster of residents refilling their amphorae, their voices rising in sleepy conversation. The water splashes steadily, its sound blending with the soft hum of the waking street. You take your turn, lifting the heavy jug, feeling the cool weight of the water settle into your arms. You glance back toward your insula, its crooked wooden balconies stacked like tired books, its plaster walls peeling, in places but still standing. The gourd of garum waits for you there, a quiet marker of yesterday's errand, and the small comforts of your simple room beckon like the familiar corners of a well-worn story. The day stretches ahead, its rhythm already unfolding, the soft press of sandals on stone, the steady beat of daily routines, the quiet murmur of life stacked floor upon floor. and you step back into it, steady, familiar, woven gently into the slow heartbeat of the insula. You head back toward your insula, the morning sunlight brushing softly against your shoulders as the street begins to fill with the slow shuffle of daily life. Market traders, apprentices, and bakers all fall into their well-worn grooves. Their movements a kind of sleepy choreography that the city has practiced for centuries. You slip into your building's narrow entrance, nodding briefly to the neighbor, who's just beginning to sweep yesterday's dust from the stairwell. His broom is little more than a bundle of reeds tied together, but it does the job. You wonder, briefly, how many generations of feet have worn the steps beneath his sweep. Inside your room, the walls are painted with simple plaster, now softened to a patchy off-white that holds the faint scars of past repairs. A small wooden chest sits near the wall, its simple iron latch holding your few treasures, an extra tunic, a carefully folded blanket, and a tiny oil lamp with a stubby wick. The lamp's handle is shaped like a fish, probably mass-produced, but you like to think someone picked this one for its little curling tail. Historians still argue whether most Roman apartment dwellers had such personal objects, or whether those were luxuries more common in the homes of the upper class. Some scholars suggest mass production in simple decorations like lamps and pottery widely accessible. Others believe that even the most humble decorations remained out of reach for the poorest residents, whose lives centered around purely functional items. You notice your neighbor's door is ajar, and the smell of garum fermented fish sauce drifts lazily into the stairwell. The familiar tang of it hovers in the air, sharp but not unpleasant, at least not anymore. You've grown used to its stubborn presence in the insula, clinging to walls and hanging in the corridors, like a quiet reminder of what passes for seasoning around here. It's a strange thing, really, how the routines settle into you. You find comfort now in the scrape of wooden shutters swinging open, the low clink of amphorae settling against stone, the distant thump of a cloth rug being shaken out over a balcony. You wrap your scarf loosely around your neck, a simple length of cloth, worn soft from use and set off again, this time toward the local public. Bathhouse. Bathing isn't just about getting clean in Rome, it's where you collect the soft threads of news, where you linger in warm pools and float through easy conversations. It's a rhythm woven into the heartbeat of the city. The bathhouse isn't grand, it's not one of those towering marble structures with elaborate mosaics, but it's solid, dependable, and carries the warm, humid scent of steam and olive oil. You slip off your tunic in the changing room, folding it carefully into a woven basket and tucking your sandals beneath it. You notice others doing the same, familiar faces, quiet nods exchanged as everyone shuffles toward the next small comfort. You ease into the tepidarium first, the warm room where the air wraps around you like a soft, damp blanket. You linger. Here, your breathing slowing, your muscles loosening under the gentle heat. Historians still debate whether Roman apartment dwellers used the baths as frequently as wealthier citizens, or if some found the entry fees a little too steep for daily visits. Some suggest the baths were truly democratic spaces, affordable and widely used. Others argue that the cost, though modest, may have made frequent bathing more of an occasional luxury for poorer insular residents. You move next to the caldarium, the hot room where steam hangs thick in the air, and the water in the central basin shimmers faintly under the oil lamps. You slide into the heated pool, your skin prickling in the warmth, your shoulders dipping beneath the surface as you settle into the quiet hush of it. Around you, soft conversations ripple like lazy waves. One man talks about the grain shipment arriving late. Another mutters about a neighbor's leaky roof. Someone chuckles softly, recounting how his goat nearly wandered into the governor's procession that morning. The bathhouse holds these stories loosely, like a net catching small fish fragments of daily life drifting gently through the steam. You step out carefully, moving toward the pale stone bench where you'll scrape your skin with a stridula, curved metal tool used to clean away sweat and oil. You drag it slowly along your arm, watching as the thin film collects, then wipe it away with a cloth, the motion rhythmic and oddly soothing. A boy passes by offering oil stored in small clay flasks with wooden stoppers. You pour a little into your palm, rubbing it into your skin, the scent faint and earthy. Historians still puzzle over whether the oils used in modest bathhouses were truly as luxurious as some sources suggest, or whether many of them were simple, local blends, occasionally stretched with cheaper additives. Some argue that even the humble oils were carefully sourced and prized. Others believe that most residents simply used what was available, whatever the vendor had that day, often a little diluted, but serviceable. You linger in the baths, your body relaxing into the soft weightlessness, the familiar press of water around you like an old, steady friend. You notice the old man with the creaky knees carefully easing himself into the pool, his slow grin one you've seen dozens of times. He always hums the same three-note tune as he sinks into the water. He's part of the scenery now, part of the rhythm. You realize the bathhouse isn't about scrubbing yourself spotless. It's about showing up, about slipping into the soft cadence of the city's slow heartbeat, about finding yourself wrapped in the warm, familiar hum of other people's lives, brushing gently against yours. The bathhouse workers start to shuffle about, adjusting oil lamps and sweeping small puddles toward the drains. It's a quiet signal the rhythm is shifting. The day's beginning to pick up its pace. You dress again, the damp warmth clinging softly to your skin, the faint scent of olive oil lingering as you step back onto the street. The city feels brighter now, the stone warmed by the sun, the markets humming, the carts rattling their slow way toward the forum. You pull your scarf a little tighter against your neck, smile briefly at the lazy cat draped over a windowsill, and fall back into the steady rhythm of the day. The bathhouse is behind you now, but its slow warmth trails quietly along. You step back onto the street, the air now comfortably warm, the sun casting long, soft shadows against the patchwork stone. You meander through the winding alleys, passing the lazy hum of market stalls, where merchants arrange their wares with the same gentle care they've practiced 1,000 mornings before. Your next stop is the insulae's communal water fountain, a tall, simple structure with a wide stone basin, where a steady stream trickles from a spout shaped like a lion's head. The sound of water spilling against stone is oddly soothing, a soft heartbeat in the quiet bustle of the neighborhood. Fetching water is one of those daily rituals you can't skip. You carry a clay jug, its surface cool beneath your palm, its rounded belly bumping lightly against your leg as you walk. As you wait your turn, you notice the soft rhythm of the fountain's life, a woman chatting lazily with her neighbor while filling her jar, a young boy attempting to splash his sister when no one's looking, an older man adjusting the rope that steadies his bucket on the ledge. You exchange brief nods. Your place in this quiet water queue well understood. Historians still debate whether the water fountains in Rome's poorer neighborhoods flowed as reliably as those in wealthier districts. Some argue that the aqueduct system was so well planned that even the humblest streets had steady access. Others suggest that water interruptions and slower flow rates may have been common, especially in densely packed apartment areas like yours. Your jug fills steadily, the cool water rising with a faint gurgle. You watch as the droplets form tiny rivulets along the cracked stone, their paths familiar, as though they've worn their own quiet trails over years of repetition. Carrying water is more than just a chore, it's a tether to the rhythm of the city. Everyone needs it. Everyone passes through these fountains, brushing lightly against one another's stories, sharing space if not words. You hoist the jug carefully against your hip and begin your walk home. It's heavier now, the water shifting with each step, the weight settling comfortably into your arms, as though the jug itself knows the way back. You pass doorways where neighbors sit on low stools, chatting idly or simply watching the street drift by. One man is repairing a broken sandal strap, threading a new leather tie with fingers that have done this more times than he could count. Another woman hums softly while peeling garlic, her pile of fragrant husks slowly growing at her feet. There's a quiet understanding among insular dwellers that the stairs, the streets, the fountains, these are shared spaces. Your life spills a little into your neighbors, and theirs into yours, like rainwater finding its way into the same gutter. You step carefully past a delivery cart rattling toward the upper floors, its wheels creaking, its driver pausing every few paces to catch his breath. The cart is stacked with bundles, olive oil jars, cloth rolls, dried bean supplies destined for the cramped kitchens above. Historians still argue whether most Roman apartment dwellers cooked their own meals at home or relied heavily on nearby food stalls and popinate, those small, tavern-like eateries tucked into street corners. Some scholars suggest that insular kitchens were often too small or too smoky to manage full meals. Others believe that even in tight quarters, simple cooking remained a cherished part of daily life. You climb the familiar stairwell, the stone steps uneven from centuries of footsteps, the occasional crack telling quiet stories of the building's age. Your kitchen space is modest, a small hearth, a few battered pots, and a wooden shelf holding basic ingredients: lentils, barley, dried herbs, a soft chunk of cheese wrapped in cloth. Today's meal will be simple. It usually is. You scoop a portion of lentils into a clay pot, pouring the freshly fetched water over them, the liquid settling with a soft swirl. You light the fire, the flame flickering to life as you feed it a small bundle of twigs and dried leaves. As the lentils simmer, the warm, earthy scent begins to fill the room, curling gently into the cracked plaster walls, slipping beneath the doorway, mingling with the street's constant low murmur. You slice a piece of bread, its crust tough, but its center still soft enough to chew, and you dip it briefly into a small dish of garum. The salty tang hits your tongue immediately, a flavor that's become almost a comfort now, sharp but familiar. Your meal is quiet, the clink of your spoon against the pot a soft punctuation against the hum of the afternoon. You remember that the street seller you passed this morning was offering honey cakes today, small, dense, and just sweet enough to count as a treat. You make a note to save a few coins tomorrow, in case he returns. Historians still puzzle over whether such street foods were seen as indulgences or everyday fare for Rome's apartment dwellers. Some argue that treats like honey cakes were rare, little luxuries, savored when possible. Others believe that quick snacks from street vendors were woven so tightly into daily routines that even modest homes enjoyed them regularly. After your meal, you step back into the stairwell, your jug now empty, your belly warm. You climb slowly toward the rooftop, your building's own small escape hatch into the sky. The rooftop is uneven, its surface patched where rain has carved quiet scars, but it offers a soft, steady breeze and a view across the tangle of rooftops, stretching like a lazy puzzle toward the horizon. Other neighbors are here, too. A woman carefully rearranges laundry lines, her linen sheets flapping like small sails. Two men sit cross-legged near the edge, playing a quiet game of knucklebones, their soft clinks blending with the cooing of pigeons nearby. You find your usual spot near the corner, where the stone is just warm enough, where the breeze lifts the edge of your scarf and carries with it the faint scent of the bakery down the street. You close your eyes for a moment, listening to the soft rhythms, the flap of laundry, the distant rumble of carts, the lazy clatter of game pieces, the low hum of Rome breathing beneath you. The rooftop is not grand. It's not the terrace of a senator's villa, but it's yours, a quiet patch of sky where you can pause, where the weight of the day settles gently into your shoulders. You let yourself linger, your body easing into the rhythm, your pulse slowing to match the lazy sway of linen above. You linger on the rooftop, the stone still warm beneath you, the sky softening into that lazy gold that always seems to arrive too soon. The breeze ruffles your sleeve, cool and steady, carrying the mingled scents of bread, distant oil lamps, and the faint tang of river air. The day is not over, but it's bending gently toward evening, that in-between time when people start drifting back toward home, their baskets lighter, their sandals dustier. You watch as your neighbors slowly gather their laundry from the lines, folding worn tunics and rough linens into neat stacks, their fingers moving with the muscle memory of 1,000 other evenings, just like this one. Below, the streets begin to hum a little louder, not with urgency, but with the shuffle of traders packing up, the low calls of street food vendors offering one last round of stuffed dates or honey cakes before the fires go out. Your own stomach stirs at the thought. Historians still debate whether insular residents typically took their final meals of the day at home or whether they often relied on the popinae, the small, informal eateries that peppered Roman neighborhoods. Some scholars suggest that simple, portable dinners from street vendors were the norm for those living in tight quarters. Others believe that even with cramped kitchens, evening meals at home remained a quiet anchor in the day's rhythm. You rise from your spot, brushing the dust from your tunic, and begin the familiar descent down the uneven stairs. The walls here carry the soft ghost of 1,000 hands steadying themselves, the worn patches tracing the quiet pulse of the building's life. Outside, the streets glow faintly with the golden wash of sunset. The vendor with the honey cakes is still there, his tray a little emptier now, but his voice still steady as he calls out the day's final offerings. You approach, exchanging a small handful of coins for a cake just warm enough to melt slightly against your fingertips. Its sweetness is simple, its texture soft but faintly crisp along the edges. You let the sugar settle on your tongue, a quiet pleasure folded neatly into the end of the day. You wander toward the neighborhood popina, not necessarily for a meal tonight, but for the gentle hum of the space. The popina is modest, its wooden benches smoothed by years of use, its walls faintly stained from oil lamps. It scents a comforting mix of spiced wine, garlic, and the sharp salt of cured fish. You settle on a bench near the back, where the breeze from the open doorway carries in the low chatter of passers-by. The popina keeper offers you a cup of watered wine, its edge softened by a hint of honey, the clarim cool against your lip. The wine isn't particularly fine, but it's not trying to be. It's just something to hold in your hand, something to sip slowly as the evening slides toward night. At the table next to you, a quiet game unfolds to men-tossing knucklebones, the soft clink of bone against wood marking time in a way no sundial could. You notice how the popina isn't loud, it isn't hurried. It's the kind of place where stories unfurl slowly, where the rhythm of conversation is as much about silences as it is about words. Historians still puzzle over the role of popinae in Roman apartment districts, whether They were lively, bustling hubs of gossip and games, or quieter, more intimate spots where weary neighbors simply shared bread and a slow drink. Some argue that the rowdier reputation came later, colored by the moralizing tones of Roman elites who rarely set foot in such places. Others believe that even the most modest popina carried its own gentle code, a place where the day could soften, not spiral. You sip your wine, the sweet edge settling comfortably against your palate, the clay cup warming slightly in your palm. The baker's apprentice drops by, chatting easily with the popina keeper about tomorrow's dough, about whether the olive shipment from the port arrived on time, about which neighbor's goat somehow made its way into the vegetable seller's stall again. There's a story there, a goat with a particular fondness for figs, apparently, and the way they tell it, you're almost sure the goat's been planning its snack heists with quiet precision. You let the edges of their conversation wash over you, the details slipping comfortably into the soft fabric of the evening. You think about your own small apartment, the worn floorboards, the faint scent of this morning's lentils still clinging to the walls, the steady thrum of your buildings, heartbeat water jugs shifting, doors creaking, sandals brushing against cracked stone. You finish the last sip of your wine, the sweetness lingering as you stand and step back into the cooling street. The lamps are beginning to flicker to life now, their golden light pooling gently against doorways, their shadows stretching long and soft. You take your time walking home, your steps slow, your body easing into the quiet rhythm that always seems to settle over the city at this hour. At the foot of your building, you pause briefly, listening to the soft creak of a neighbor's door closing, the distant thump of someone carefully unrolling their sleeping mat on the floor above. The air here is thick with the day's quiet residue, the scent of olive oil, the faint sweetness of crushed grapes, the steady pulse of a neighborhood exhaling as night settles in. You climb the familiar stairs, your fingers tracing the same smoothed edges, your body moving with the soft certainty of someone who knows. Each worn step, each squeaky board, each patch of cool stone. Your door greets you with a gentle creak, the hinges leaning slightly, but still holding firm, inside. The room is quiet, the last threads of sunlight slipping lazily across the floor. You light a small oil lamp, its flame blooming to life, casting a soft, flickering glow against the plaster walls. You fold yourself onto your mat, stretching your legs, the day's rhythm still pulsing faintly in your limbs. The honey cake's sweetness lingers on your tongue, the soft weight of the popina's wine resting comfortably in your belly. You close your eyes, the steady rhythm of your breath beginning to match the quiet heartbeat of the building around you. There is no rush, no hurry, only the slow, familiar pulse of a Roman apartment, carrying you gently into the soft hush of the evening. The night hums around you now, soft and steady, the city easing into that slow, velvet rhythm where everything seems to drift. Just a little, from your mat, you can hear the gentle creak of someone shifting above you, a neighbor settling in, maybe unrolling their own bedding, maybe rearranging their few precious items to make a little more space. The walls, worn and cracked, don't hide much, but there's comfort in that, in the gentle chorus of breathing, footsteps, and the occasional soft clatter of a wooden cup. Resting evenly on a stone shelf, you breathe in the faint scent of oil lamps and last night's bread, still lingering like a friendly ghost. The streets beyond your door are quieter now. The vendors have packed away their carts. The popina's laughter has softened into low murmurs, and even the goats seem to have found their way home, their soft hooves no longer tapping against the stone. Somewhere, a latecomer shuffles past your building, his sandals brushing rhythmically against the road, the soft jangle of his belt pouch marking his steady pace. His footsteps fade quickly, swallowed by the night. You rest your hand lightly against the wall beside you, its surface cool and rough beneath your fingertips, and you realize that this wall, like the gourd of a patient griot, has held stories, 2 quiet ones, the kind that stay folded inside the dust and the wood. Historians still debate whether insulae were built with any true sense of longevity, or whether they were considered temporary, fragile structures destined to crumble and be rebuilt within a few generations. Some scholars argue that the speed and scale of Roman urban growth left little room for careful planning or durable materials. Others suggest that despite their flaws, these buildings were deeply lived-in spaces, their histories etched into the stone by the steady rhythm of ordinary lives. You think about how your own story has joined this place now, how your breath, your steps, your quiet routines have been folded into the building's soft, worn memory. You sit up briefly, reaching for your small water jug. Its sides cool with the faint dampness of the evening air. You sip slowly, the water settling easily in your throat. Its familiar taste a small comfort. Across the courtyard, you hear the muffled sounds of a family finishing their prayers, their voices low and steady, the cadence soft and unhurried. You listen without straining, letting their words drift toward you like a gentle breeze. Nearby, a child stirs, mumbling half-formed words in his sleep, the soft scrape of a blanket dragging briefly against the floor. You let your gaze wander to the small clay lamp flickering beside you, its flame bending slightly as the breeze brushes past. You think about the rhythm of your days, the morning light slipping past the shutters, the quiet descent to the ground floor, the shuffle to the public latrine, the soft murmur of greetings, the slow climb to the roof to check the laundry. You remember the feel of the cracked tiles beneath your feet, the faintly uneven edge of the wooden stairs, the particular creak of the door to floors below that always seems to catch. These are not grand stories. They are not the sweeping arcs of emperors or the clang of battlefield glories, but they are steady, and they are yours. You think about the baker's honey cakes, the popina's watered wine, the goat's stubborn love for figs, and the way your neighbor's sandal always seems to slap a little louder against the stairs than anyone else's. These are the details that hold you, the small weights that give the day its shape. You lie back, letting your body settle into the familiar grooves of your mat, your breath matching the slow rhythm of the building's heartbeat. You feel the soft pulse of life continuing around you above, below, beside the insula holding all of you in its quiet, steady arms. You close your eyes, the last flicker of lamplight pressing gently against your eyelids, and you let the day soften, let the edges blur, let the small, steady sounds of Roman apartment life wrap around you like a familiar cloak. Here, there is no rush, no grand finish, just the slow exhale of another ordinary day, folding gently into the next. Wind dashed down the building hums softly now, its heartbeat low and patient, the footsteps quieting, the last voices folding into silence. The oil lamp flickers steadily, its golden light casting long, lazy shadows across the cool stone walls. You breathe slowly, each breath a little deeper, a little heavier, as the air settles around you like soft, worn linen. The streets beyond your door have slipped into their hush, the sandals, the chatter, the soft creak of carts all stilled now, resting. You can still hear it, though that faint, steady pulse of the building itself, the soft weight of the walls, the low sigh of wooden beams settling, the gentle whisper of the wind brushing past the edges of the insulae. It holds you here, wraps you gently, lets you drift. The sweetness of honey lingers faintly on your tongue, the warmth of the evening's wine resting comfortably in your belly, the quiet rhythm of the day folding softly around you. There is no need to move, No need to think of tomorrow's sandals or morning's climb. There is just this moment, this breath, this soft heartbeat. You can rest here. The lamp's flame softens, its edges blurring, its flicker slowing, easing, settling, the day sighs. The city sighs. And you can let yourself sigh to. The stories can wait, the sandals can wait. Here, you are held, steady, soft, at ease. The quiet wraps you, and you can rest now. End of script. Sweet dreams.